I have been busy, friends and enemies and assorted potted plants. I have spent the month busy. At the start of the month, on the 3rd, I participated in a sit-in in Bernie Sanders' office. Sort of crashed it. Then, on the Saturday of the first week of the month, I participated in a huge march on Washington to the White House in support of Palestine. I'm to understand that there were around 300,000 people participating in that march. So many people that Freedom Plaza could not hold all of them. I tried to livestream the first thing, the sit-in at Sanders' office, but it didn't work and I'm not sure why. The best I can figure is that maybe some security software that I have on my phone interfered with the live streaming, but I don't know. I'm gonna be mad at myself for a long time over that, but that is not what's important. What is important right now, I think, is the question, why? Not, why do you support Hamas? Or, why do you want to destroy Israel? Although I will spare exactly 1 moment for the people who would ask that. I have, generally speaking, 2 responses to those people. First, Israel has spent a month indiscriminately bombing Gaza to rubble. They have bombed apartment complexes, schools, hospitals, UN safe sites, and have gone so far as to specifically target civilians fleeing the violence that they have perpetrated. Specifically targeting civilians that are fleeing their violence to the places Israel told those civilians to flee to, I might add. They have targeted and killed specific journalists and their families. They have targeted and destroyed specific ambulances. These are not the actions of a group that is trying to stop a violent insurgency. These are the actions of a group that is in the process of an extermination campaign. I would have hoped that I don't need to sit here and explain that these actions are... Repugnant is not a strong enough word. Reprehensible is not a strong enough word. Monstrous? Cartoonishly evil? I would have hoped that I don't need to sit here and expound upon how these actions are so lacking in moral fiber that they are cartoonishly evil, and any person who even entertains the notion of defending them is entirely lacking in moral fiber as well. And yet here we are. Second, to those people not compelled by what I just explained, I would like you to go sprint to the nearest available burning building. Jump inside and die in a fire. I have no patience left for anyone who is willing to buy into whatever lies Israel is spouting at the moment, and I have even less patience for them. Gaza will be free from river to sea. Deal with it. But no, the why I am referring to is, Ron, why would you go all the way out to DC, which is pretty far away from where you live, to try and influence federal politicians? Something you have said yourself numerous times is pointless. And no joke, that is an excellent question. Because I have said that numerous times over a number of years and in numerous different contexts, and I still believe it. This is something you should ask yourself before engaging in any political action. What are your goals? What are the specific stated goals of the orgs that you are working with? And what are they trying to do with the action that they are performing? Now, I'm not going to speak for the rest of the Palestine Solidarity Working Group. I was a late add-on and was basically a volunteer, and I managed to mess up the one thing that they asked me to do, so maybe I'm not in the best place to do that. I am also not going to speak for the 7 or 8 other orgs that participated in various sit-ins at the Capitol on that day, or the dozens, if not hundreds of different orgs that arranged and participated in the march that occurred on the 4th. I will say that our org was given 3 specific demands to relay to Sanders. First, to demand a ceasefire between Gaza and Israel, or to support a ceasefire if someone else proposed it. Second, to reject the bill that his committee was going over that would have provided arms to Israel. And third, to stop providing arms to Israel altogether, either through an ongoing process or by simply refusing to let such a bill pass through the Senate. That second one is a bit contextual, it was specifically about that bill, but the first one and the third one are very good starting points. We want a ceasefire, not a humanitarian pause, A humanitarian pause means nothing. A humanitarian pause means you're going to give people sandwiches before you bomb them to kingdom come. It's not humanitarian, it's pretending to be humanitarian while you know you have eyes on you. It's not doing nothing, it's worse than doing nothing. It's doing nothing and being proud of it. I will also state that our actions did, not said, but did, specific things. Both the sit-ins and the march were escalations. That by itself sends a message. It says that the demands that we are making are not negotiable. It sends the message to politicians that if they are unwilling to fix the thing, then we will fix the thing. And people are doing that. Protesters in Oakland stopped a ship with arms from leaving harbor. Protesters in Connecticut, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Hamilton shut down arms factories. Fundraisers hosted by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have been interrupted. BlackRock HQ in New York was shut down for a while. All of this is good. All of these are good steps. There's another thing we did too. We talked to the people in the office. We tried to convince them that what we were doing was effective and necessary. That ended with someone who I'm to understand was the head coordinator of the Sanders campaign, a woman named Misty, storming out of Sanders' office in tears. Shortly afterwards is when everyone got arrested. And one of the things that I heard about later was how somewhere about 100 congressional staffers walked out of Congress and demanded a ceasefire in Gaza. And I would like to think that us going down there and making our case helped them to do that. Because we want that. We want the people who do the legwork to say we're sick and tired of this too. Moving forward, I think that activists should consider 3 major prongs of action: material infrastructure, political infrastructure, and financial infrastructure. Material infrastructure will be the means to physically conduct the extermination campaign that's happening in Gaza. Things like bombs and bullets and guns, as well as the means to both manufacture and transport those things. Political infrastructure is the means to do politics, both the places where politics is done and the people who do the politics. Financial infrastructure is both the people and the corporations who are making a profit from the extermination campaign and the means that they use to do so vis-a-vis politics. All of these groups will need to be disrupted. And all of these groups require different means and methods for those disruptions to be effective. And guess who has 2 thumbs and has been puzzling out, what happened to my thumb? Material infrastructure are the bullets, the bombs, the guns, and the equipment that are used to conduct the extermination campaign in Gaza, as well as the boats and the trains and the other means of shipment that are used to transport them. They are the physical means used to inflict harm upon the nation of Gaza. Ideally, we would have people protesting at munitions factories and arms factories in such a way as to prevent their operation, at least temporarily, which is something that is already happening. We would also ideally have people in train stations and at harbors physically preventing the shipment of arms, which is, again, I cannot stress this enough, something that is already happening. These should be the highest priority target for disruption. If Joe Biden says that there is a 0% chance for a ceasefire, the best way to make him eat his words is by forcing a ceasefire by throttling the means used to take innocent lives. That being said, there are only so many factories and there are only so many docks. It is not going to take 300,000 people to shut them all down. It should also be borne in mind that this kind of action could potentially be dangerous. Not only are you potentially dealing with the police, but you could also be dealing with angry dock workers or factory workers. If you're going out to do this kind of action, you'll want to go in numbers. At least 20 people, more if you can get them. Political infrastructure is the people who make political policy and enable political policy to be made, as well as the places that they go to do that policy making. This notably does not just include, and I would say does not even primarily include, elected political officials. There's this intuition I have, and I will admit that this is mostly speculation, that the reason that politicians in the United States are so unwilling to even use the word ceasefire is because they're taking orders from the corporate leadership, from the party leadership. If that is the case, then appealing to politicians directly is pointless. They are not expressing their own beliefs, they're just expressing the party line. And if it is true that these politicians are just repeating the line given to them by the corporate party leadership, then it stands to reason that the most effective way to get either party to change their stance is to act against the parties directly. Also, minor point, if it is not the case that politicians are just taking orders, if they are simply expressing their own deeply held beliefs and nearly identical verbiage, then this is still advantageous to us because it is still an escalation, which is something that we want to do anyway. Now, the way that we would act against either party is by interfering with the operations of their party headquarters. Every party has a state headquarters, both Republicans and Democrats, and almost every county has a party headquarters. These are the places that we would go to interfere with their processes, to hold space and to make demands. And, finally, when we make demands, we would not make demands of elected officials, because we are presuming that they are not expressing their beliefs. We would make demands of internally elected bureaucrats, the internally elected party leaders. Hiya. Sidebar Ron here. I have been asked to make a specific point by other activists who I've been in touch with. Please be kind to the staffers who are working in these places. In this kind of action, we would specifically be opposing the leadership of these political parties. We would not be opposing every single person who works there. That would be preposterous. Not just because there are plenty of these people working in these places who are sick and tired of the bloodshed in Gaza, but also because these people are, by and large, sick and tired of elected officials abdicating their responsibility to the people who elected them. And even in the cases where neither of those things are true, even in the cases where these people love that people are being murdered in Gaza, and love that the elected officials don't care, these are still working people. Even if they're not on our side, we ought to be on theirs. I'll use my own state and county, Sangamon County in Illinois, as an example. The Illinois Democratic Party state headquarters is located at 2102 South Veterans Parkway, Suite C. That's here in Springfield, over on the west side, about a stone's throw away from the Masonic Center. The Sangamon County Democratic office is located at 312 East Monroe Street in Springfield. That's a couple blocks away from the state capitol. Both of them are in Springfield? That's convenient. The executive director of the Democratic Party is a man named Ben Hardin. The deputy director is Marina Faz Hupert. The chair for the Sangamon County Democratic Party is William Houlihan. The ideal way that I would perform an action like this is very simple. I would walk in with a group of other people, demand to speak to the people in charge, the people who I mentioned before, and deliver our demands to the staff. I'm going to defer to the demands that we were told to give Bernie Sanders in DC. First, call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, or support a ceasefire if it has already been proposed. Second, stop sending weapons to Israel. No ifs, ands, or buts. Those are good demands. Those are solid demands. That's a solid starting point. And we would stay in the building and interfere with their day-to-day operations until such a time as we were heard out by the party leadership or dragged out by the police. And I will make the same open offer that I've made every time that I've brought this up. I'm on Twitter. I'm back on Twitter and I'm behaving, so I should be there for a while. I'm also on Blue Sky if you manage to get a code. If you can't find your Democratic or Republican office, either state or county, message me and I will help you find them. Most of these state headquarters and county headquarters also have websites. These websites have valuable information, not just people who were involved with the process of doing politics, but also a list of events and newsletters that you can sign up for that will tell you events ahead of time. We want to sign up for these newsletters. We want to check these calendars because we want to know when these events are happening. We want to crash these events if possible, especially fundraisers. One of the main ways that we're going to be able to leverage our manpower against both parties is by preventing them from raising monetary funds. These places should be the second priority for disruption, but there are a lot more places, so there will necessarily be a lot more of these specific disruptions. Again, every state has a Democratic and Republican Party leadership building, so that's 100 places. And nearly every county also has a headquarters, so that's hundreds more. And that's not even counting the events that we would be interfering with. There would be dozens of those in every state, maybe hundreds. Most of these actions would also be very low risk and require a very small number of people. Speaking from personal experience, you can shut down a county branch with, like, 8 people. It's not hard. Sidebar on again. I'm also going to link to a tweet that I found that explains how you can send an old-fashioned fax over the internet. Evidently, you can send like 5 of them a day for free. Word from people who are sympathetic to activists generally, and people who are sympathetic to what we're doing specifically, is that emails are being ignored, calls are being let go to voicemail, meetings are being rescheduled and skipped. They're trying to ignore us. They're trying to ignore us because they're being told to do something that they don't have an answer for. It is imperative that we do not allow ourselves to be ignored. It is imperative that we keep escalating until we cannot be ignored. Although, I need to stress again, that does not extend to the staffers and the maintenance people in the building. Those are just regular working people. We are opposed to the leadership and the decisions that the leadership is making. Those people, the working people, are on our side for the most part. Treat them with kindness, please. Financial infrastructure is a little bit different than the other 2 things that I've talked about. In the strictest sense, we've already talked about it. Preventing the parties from raising funds and interfering with the production of arms are technically both of those things, but eventually we're going to need to escalate further than that, and probably sooner rather than later. Sidebar on for the 3rd time. That little bit was initially the only explanation I was going to give as to why we need to interrupt financial institutions. I decided that wasn't good enough. I mentioned before that I believe that both parties' opposition to a ceasefire is a party-wide decision, a party leadership decision, not a decision that individual people were making. I'm certain that simply explaining that was enough for at least some people, and to those people, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your entirely misplaced confidence in me. But for others, for most people I imagine, that begged a question. Why is the party leadership opposed to a ceasefire? I have an answer for that. I have several answers for that, actually. One of them is a daisy chain of kicking the can down the road until we arrive at, it's the economy, stupid. I would hope that I don't need to tell you, the person viewing this, at or after the year of our Lord 2023, that the economy is in bad shape right now. It's in bad shape, and it's been in bad shape since 2007. The housing market crashed, and the economy never recovered. It might seem like the economy recovered. It might seem like the economy soared to never-before-seen heights, but that's not how the economy is supposed to work. The economy is not like a damage counter in an RPG. You do not want the biggest number possible. You want the numbers to rise slowly, if at all. Like a heartbeat. Stability is the most important thing. If your heart rate is oscillating between never-before-seen highs and never-before-dreamed of lows, that is not a sign of great health. That is a sign that you are having a heart attack, that you are dying, and that you need to seek immediate medical attention. To oversimplify the problem quite a lot. Explaining in greater detail would require an entirely different video from an entirely different person, but suffice it to say that the only way to fix the economy is to fundamentally restructure the economy. Basically taking a bunch of money from all the rich people and giving it to not rich people in order to fix things. In quite a few cases, literally giving money to people in order to fix crumbling infrastructure. The primary reason that hasn't happened is because the wealthy people whom we would be taking the money from are preventing that from happening by paying absurd amounts of money to lobbyists and congresspeople in order to prevent that from happening, to prevent anything from happening that doesn't directly benefit them. In the long term, they are making the whiplash that everyone is going to face 100 times worse. What it comes down to is that the leadership of both parties do not want the economy to collapse on their watch. So if keeping the zombie economy going requires the sacrifice of literally millions of people, well, it wouldn't even be the first time this decade they made that sacrifice. To quote Alan McLeod over on Twitter, weapons manufacturers are making a killing off of all the killing. Israel is buying arms and munitions and equipment. America is buying arms and munitions and equipment and sending it to Israel. Different countries like the UK are doing the same thing, and there's just a lot of money greasing a lot of palms. We need to interfere with that in any way possible. Crashing fundraisers works, preventing the manufacture of arms and munitions works, but eventually we're going to need to go a step further than that. We need to interfere with the day-to-day functions of these arms corporations, and we would do that in largely the same way that we would interfere with the functioning of political parties. We would go in, we would make demands, and we would hold space until we were heard out or dragged out. The difference would be that this is the most dangerous kind of protest that a person could be involved in. Politicians, as they exist right now, are a bulwark to prevent people from acting against the real powers in this country and in the rest of the world, the capitalists. And with these kinds of actions, we would be acting directly against the capitalists, something that they would recognize immediately. The police are not going to be as nice. The employees are not going to be as patient. There is a very good chance you will get roughed up. For these reasons, these actions will require experienced activists in numbers with a robust support network. For those reasons, this kind of disruption would be the lowest priority. If this would be your first political action, you are not prepared. Another thing that I feel the need to state specifically and explicitly: do not act on your own. I say this without malice or judgment, just as a matter of fact. You are not going to save the world. Not by yourself. There are organizations, there are groups that will help you if you want to help. If you're looking to just find a local event, the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights has a list of events. You can go to those and just run into local orgs in your area. The Party for Socialism and Liberation are all in on this. They'd be happy to have you. If you have a local BLM chapter, there's a pretty good chance they're on board for supporting Gaza. There are all kinds of Palestinian solidarity orgs and peace in Palestine orgs floating around. The Palestinian Youth Movement, the National Students for Justice in Palestine, Answer Coalition, the People's Forum, International People's Assembly, and above all, do not act alone. One person can be ignored. One person can be ignored quite easily, as a matter of fact. It is only by acting collectively, it is only by working together that we can effect change. And it is going to need to be us that affects change. I want to stress that again, because that's the bottom of the thing. We are far past the point where the question is, how are we going to convince our politicians to stop this? With a handful of very notable exceptions, even the most progressive members of the Senate and the House have made it very clear that there is no possibility of them acting on this. The question that we face now is, how do we prevent the extermination campaign in Gaza? Everything that I have said is a means to that specific goal. Because that's what I want. I want the killing to end. If the price of the democracy that I live in is that tens of thousands of people, or hundreds of thousands of people, or millions of people have to die on a whim, then I do not want to have anything to do with that democracy. That my supposed freedom comes at the price of the suffering and deaths of millions of people is absolutely unacceptable. It was unacceptable when it was Iraq and Afghanistan, it was unacceptable when it was COVID, and it is unacceptable now. That this could be avoided entirely with a handful of signatures is a slap in the face to all of those innocent people and to us. Never forget. Never forget that these feckless politicians refused to stop the killing, not because they didn't have the power to stop it, but because it would be politically inconvenient. Never forget that they refused to stop it in spite of how many people demanded that it stop. Never forget that. Never forget they did that. Because that's why we have to stop it. They won't do it. The feckless politicians won't do it. So it has to be us. Heya, Postscript Ron here with some old-fashioned postscript goodness. There have been a number of developments in the 3 days it took me to edit this video together, and I thought I would talk about them a bit. The first thing, and something that I want to make exceedingly clear, the ideas and strategies presented in this video are not mine. They are strategies that people were talking about while I was in DC, and in some cases have been talking about for upwards of a decade. The tactic to disrupt party headquarters? I first heard of that when a group called Indivisible, composed of former staffers, proposed a similar plan in 2013 in response to the 2013 government shutdown. These are not new ideas, and I have not come up with them myself. I have just aggregated them. That these are not my ideas should be no surprise to people who have been paying attention to the news. Protesters have continued to do their thing. Some protesters blocked off the entrance to the DNC headquarters and were brutalized by the police. Evidently, protesters also shut down the California Democratic Convention. Good for them. That's exactly what we need. Refuse to be ignored. And the second thing. I have heard rumors of a potential, not a ceasefire, but a humanitarian pause. I seem to remember stating before that a humanitarian pause was worse than nothing. I maintain that. This does, however, seem to be an indication that the pressure to elected officials is taking a toll. That the media is reporting on Joe Biden's collapsing poll numbers is an indication of the same. Another indication is that there are now over 40 members of Congress and the Senate who have called for a full ceasefire. I would add that in some instances, such as my Senator Dick Durbin's, the ceasefire would be conditional upon the release of hostages. Others, such as Senator Jeff Merkley, have even more preposterous demands. I would maintain that a conditional ceasefire is functionally not a ceasefire, but at least they're using the word. This doesn't mean activists should relent either. We should take this as a sign, as I said, that the pressure is working, and to keep mounting pressure on both parties. Keep those two demands: ceasefire and no more arms to Israel. And I think that's all I have to say about that, at least for now. You know where the likes are, you know where the comments are, leave one or both if you feel like it. I spent the better part of 2 weeks working on this video. Had to rewrite it from scratch after LibreOffice crashed for the first and only time, at least in my memory. Unrelated to that, I have a coffee tip jar. If you have some cash you don't need and you're not going to use it for anything else, I'd appreciate it if you tossed a little bit my way. The next video I'm planning on is the one that I put on hold to make this one, but is also related to this one. It's about buying in and how the concept has affected politics. I'm hoping that one is informative. So, until then, go out, do something important, and take care of yourselves. Gaza will be free, from river to sea. The economy is not like a damage counter in an RPG. You do not just want... The economy is not like a damage counter in an RPG. You do not just want the biggest number possible. The economy is more like a heartbeat. You want it to rise slowly, if at all. Stability is of paramount importance. So actually, just ruined that take.